Okay, good evening, everybody, which we already said. But anyway, the muktzeh that we're in the middle of learning now is muktzeh of foods which are forbidden. Now, foods that are forbidden to eat and they're not edible for animals. So we're going to discuss if it's also forbidden to benefit from it, then they are completely muktzeh. We'll discuss this now and explain it, what's going on. Now, we learned already, this we mentioned last time, meat and milk which is together, is not only forbidden to eat, but it's also forbidden to benefit from. So last time we were talking, if you have animal, dogs, cats, and you have dog food, cat food, you have to make sure there's no meat and milk in it, because even though the dog or the cat is allowed to eat non-kosher food, but bottom line is you're not allowed to benefit from meat and milk together. So therefore, if there's a food that meat and milk mix together, for whatever reason it is, that food is completely muktzeh on Shabbos, because not only is it not edible, you can't even benefit from it. The same thing, chametz and Pesach. Okay? Chametz and Pesach, not only you're not allowed to eat it, but it's also forbidden to benefit from it. So then again, that would be muktzeh completely. Now, non-kosher foods, okay? Non-kosher foods, which are, again, forbidden to eat, but you're allowed to benefit from it. So let's say non-kosher meat, pig or pork or whatever. So cheeseburger would be meat and milk together. So that would be forbidden to benefit from. So therefore, that would be muktzeh on Shabbos. But if you have, let's say, just non-kosher meat or non-kosher food that you have, whatever, you have it in your house, for whatever reason it is, so then the din is, that would not be muktzeh because you're allowed to benefit from it. For instance, a garment that has what's called shatnez, wool and linen. Now we know it's forbidden to wear wool and linen together. So therefore, a garment which is made for a garment and it has wool and linen together, so because you're not allowed to wear it, you're not allowed to benefit, well, you could benefit from it, but you're not allowed to wear it and it's made to wear, so that according to most opinions would also be muktzeh. But there's other things which the rabbis forbid on Shabbos because you might come to do something with it on Shabbos. For instance, we know biblically it's forbidden to pick a fruit off a tree on Shabbos. It's the malacha of keitzad, harvesting. If you take something off from the place it's connected to the ground, it's a biblical sin on Shabbos. So therefore the Chachamim said, if fruits fall off, let's say you have a fruit tree in your backyard, and fruits fell off the tree on Shabbos, you're not allowed to eat the fruit on Shabbos. Why are you not allowed to eat the fruit on Shabbos? The Chachamim say, because if you're allowed to eat it, you might forget and pull it off the tree. So therefore the din is, on Shabbos, fruit that fell off a tree, you're not allowed to eat on Shabbos. After Shabbos, you're allowed to eat it. It's only forbidden for Shabbos. So therefore, the fruits that fell off a tree on Shabbos and Yom Tov are muktzeh, because you're not allowed to do anything. They're made to eat, and you can't eat them. So therefore, it's muktzeh. It's forbidden to move. You can't even move it. Or another interesting thing: what happens if you have a neighbor? The neighbor has a fruit tree, and they ring your bell on Shabbos, and they say, "Here is a basket of fruit. We just picked it off our tree on Shabbos. We just picked it, freshly picked from the tree 5 minutes ago, and here we're bringing you a present." So the din is, because again, you're not allowed to eat those fruit because they picked it off the tree for you on Shabbos. So the non-Jew did something for you on Shabbos. So the din is, you're not allowed to eat on the Shabbos. So therefore, that basket of fruit becomes muktzeh. So let's say you have a non-Jewish neighbor that's very nice and friendly, and they bring you a basket of fruit that they picked on Shabbos. You have to tell them to please put it down. You don't have to tell them you just tell them please put it down and thank them very much. And that basket is muktzeh for the duration of Shabbos. The same thing, animals or fish, let's say, that were caught on Shabbos. Again, you're not allowed to eat it. So let's say your neighbor went fishing Shabbos morning, early Shabbos morning, they went fishing. And 12 o'clock noon, they come to your house with a fresh fish that they just caught that morning. Yeah, again, it's completely muktzeh. You have to tell them, please put it down. You're not allowed to move it. Or milk that was milked from a cow on Shabbos is also muktzeh on Shabbos. The only reason, technically, you're not allowed to milk a cow on Shabbos. Why are you not allowed to milk a cow on Shabbos? It's like the malacha of threshing. If threshing is extracting, like you're not allowed to squeeze fruit on Shabbos. It's all the malacha of dash. Here you're taking the milk out, you're squeezing the milk out from a place where it was absorbed within. So therefore, you're not allowed to really milk a cow on Shabbos. And if the cow was milked on Shabbos, you're not allowed to drink the milk on Shabbos. But halacha says that if a cow is in pain, it needs to be milked. Otherwise, the udder is full of milk and it's painful. So then the din is, because of that, the chachamim, because of pain of an animal, the chachamim allowed the person to milk the cow, but the milk must go to waste. You're not allowed to use the milk in any way whatsoever. So in fact, the same thing applies really with a woman, with the extracting milk from a breast. So if a baby nurses directly from the breast, it's not a problem. But if a woman is, let's say, engorged or she's in pain and she wants to relieve herself from the milk, so if the baby is not nursing directly from it, that milk has to be spilled out. The same thing if a woman is if a woman is extracting milk because she wants to keep the milk supply going. So again, really, she has to spill out the milk. She's not allowed to use the milk for the baby unless it's a situation, there's no other milk and the baby must have the milk. And, in those situations, she would be able to use the milk. So same thing, milking a cow, and for a woman to extract milk would be forbidden on Shabbos. So milk that was used on either extracted or from the woman would halachically be forbidden. Therefore, it would be muktzeh on Shabbos. Same thing if somebody owns chickens. This didn't apply to even today. People have chickens in their backyard. A chicken that was laid on Shabbos or Yom Tiv is again muktzeh. You're not allowed to eat an egg that was laid on Shabbos or Yom Tiv. So again, if you have a chicken and laid an egg on Shabbos, that egg is muktzeh until after Shabbos. After Shabbos, you'd be allowed to eat it. One more din in reference to this, and that is that juice, and you're not to squeeze a fruit, squeeze juice out of a fruit. It's the malacha of threshing, like we just said. So what happens if somebody has fruit and there was pressure on the fruit and juice that flowed out by itself, okay? You're not allowed to use that on Shabbos also. So it's muktzeh. Okay, next. Now, new utensils. Let's say I have a new utensil. I didn't bring it to the mikveh yet. Okay, it wasn't brought to the mikveh. We learned already previously that you're not allowed to immerse dishes in a mikveh on Shabbos. Even if you have a mikveh in your house, you're not allowed to immerse new dishes in a mikveh. And for food, you're not allowed to use that utensil until you bring it to the mikveh. So the question is now, if somebody has a new pot, okay, or a new dish, and they didn't table it, that is not muktzeh. Why isn't it muktzeh? Because that dish or pot or tray is still usable. You can't use it for food, but you can put other things in it. In other words, when you have a new utensil, if you want to use a new utensil for food, it has to be table that has to be immersed in the mikveh. But if you want to use it for other things, then you don't have to table it. So therefore, these things are still usable. And again, if they're usable, so then they're not muktzeh. And these plates are used many times. People put other things in the plates, on the trays, or even in the pans. They can store other pans. So In those cases, it wouldn't be muktzeh whatsoever. The same thing, a pot that became treif, became not kosher. And you're not allowed to kosher a pot on Shabbos because you're fixing it. Nevertheless, the pot wouldn't be muktzeh. Why wouldn't it be muktzeh? Because you can use it for non-food items. And it's made for that, so therefore, it wouldn't be considered muktzeh. Okay. Next, similar thing is like this. There's a din in Shabbos, what's called Vaad Rabbonim. There's a pasuk that says, the Navi says, Yeshaya Navi says, there's a whole pasuk, Mimsei chefzecha v'daber davar. Okay, we say it before Kiddush and Shabbos morning. The Gemara learns out from daber davar means you're not allowed to talk on Shabbos things that are not Shabbosdik, things that are not in the spirit of Shabbos. Therefore, according to many halachos, you're not allowed to do business in Shabbos. Therefore, many documents that represent business-like transactions are not allowed to be read on Shabbos. And we'll learn a bunch of things that are forbidden to read on Shabbos. People are unaware of this. But there's anything that's connected to business is forbidden to read on Shabbos. Because it's forbidden to read on Shabbos, it becomes muktzeh. Okay? So let's say you have contracts. You have a bill. You get a bill in the mail. Or you have a bill that you got it Friday in the mail, but it was left on your table. That bill is completely muktzeh. You can't move it for any reason. It's business. You have to pay money for the bill. That's a contract for business. Business correspondence, business related, like for instance, blueprints, layouts, graphic material, which is made like for advertisement for business. All those things are considered muktzeh because of a daber davar. Therefore, you're not allowed to read them on Shabbos. And if you're not allowed to read them on Shabbos, they become muktzeh. Now let's continue with this. For instance, it's not so common as it used to be, but the older people of the audience will remember there was something called the Sears catalog. Sears was the biggest department store in America for many years. And they used to give out a Sears catalog with pictures of everything they sell and the prices and all that stuff. Or in fact, he says here Sears catalog, because in those days it was pretty common. Now, some people say that this keli shemalachta isur, and therefore you can only move them, like we learned, you can move it only for the place, or if you need some. Why? Because they're a vessel made to do business. So, by the way, for instance, telephone directories. Okay, years ago, today everything's online. Okay, but years ago, they had something called the telephone book. The telephone book was very thick if you lived in a big city. It was a very big thick. Now, what's the purpose of a telephone book? Like its name says, it's a telephone book to look up telephone numbers. Because you're not allowed to call people on Shabbos. So a telephone book is a keli shemalachta isid, like we learned previously for a long time. Its primary use is for something forbidden. Therefore, you can only move a telephone book if you need the place, or you want to use the telephone book for something permissible. Now, years ago, before booster seats existed, people used to use telephone books to boost up a kid. Remember, you used to put on the chair and the kid would sit on the telephone book. So then you're using it for something permissible, so it'll be allowed. What happens if you want to look up an address? You want to go to a friend's house and you don't know their address. So you look up not the telephone number. Telephone number is that you're not allowed to look at because you can't use it. But you're allowed to look up an address in the phone book to know what the address is of your friend that you're planning to go to. So that would be a keli shemalachta leisur, and it would be only allowed to be moved, let's say, to go for him. Now, advertisement. This is a very interesting thing. Forget Muktzeh for a second. According to Halacha, we said you're not allowed to read any documents that deal with anything of business. So let's say you're reading, even if a Jewish press, you're reading Ami magazine, Mishpacha magazine, whatever people read today. Even though you're allowed to read the magazine, there's words of Torah, there's stories, but halachically, you're not allowed to look at the ads. You're not allowed to read the ads. Because now you're reading a document of paper, of business. For instance, it's very questionable, by the way, according to many authorities, you're not allowed to read a newspaper on Shabbos. Mishnah Berurah brings down many opinions that hold you're not allowed to read a newspaper on Shabbos. But even if you want to read a newspaper on Shabbos. So first of all, something like the Wall Street Journal, which is primarily a business newspaper, that's what it's called, Wall Street Journal. So you're not allowed to read the Wall Street Journal. It could be a keli shemalachti le'issa, so you can move it if you need the place, you need to, something else. But the bottom line is, you're not allowed to read any business of any newspaper on Shabbos. Not the Wall Street Journal, not advertisements, circulars. You get many times they leave in your mailbox these advertisement circulars, right? Whether supermarkets or real estate or whatever. All those things you're not allowed to read on Shabbos. And therefore it's a keli shemalachti le'isr, and you're only allowed to move it for Torah Guf and Mekayim if you need the place or you want to, do things like that. Certain books, okay, in Shulchan Aruch, it's very complicated. I just want to mention something. Most reading material, people are just unaware of it. I'm not saying you're going to keep it or not, but just to be aware of it. Unless if it's a Jewish novel, it's questionable if you're allowed to read it on Shabbos. Books like mystery books, short stories, plays, okay, basically are not allowed to be read on Shabbos. That's what it says in Shulchan Aruch. You're not allowed to read those books on Shabbos. Therefore, the book is a book whose primary use is forbidden to use on Shabbos. Therefore, that book would only be allowed to move instead of gufay u'mekayim, if you need the place or you want to do something permissible with the book. Okay? Now, science books, let's say books of knowledge, like what do they call? Science books, medical books, astronomy, physics, biology, books of chokhmah is an argument in Shulchan Aruch if you're allowed to read them or not. Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe also rules that the minhag is to be lenient. You're allowed to read intellectual books on Shabbos because it's studied. Therefore, the Alter Rebbe says an interesting thing with that. He just follows in the next line. Therefore, you're allowed to look at a telescope on Shabbos. Obviously, he didn't have battery-operated telescopes. But a regular telescope, you're allowed to look in Shabbos because you're gazing at the stars or whatever you're gazing at the sky. So you're not doing anything forbidden. But in the books of science, medicine, all that stuff, you're allowed to read. I mean, the minhag is that you're allowed to read it on Shabbos. So therefore, they're not Muktzeh. History books, some of them could be read. Some of them, Dr. Rebbe said, like a book called Yusifun, which was written, it's not Torah, but it was written by somebody, a reliable source, by the way, it's brought down that book in Halacha, that book discusses all the historical details that happened at the destruction of the Bais Din. Dr. Rebbe holds you could read it. Because again, it's a book about history, it's an intellectual book, it's not a book of novels, short stories, and things like that. But I just want to mention while we're on the topic, but there's another issue that poskim do discuss. What happens if somebody has a math test on Monday? Okay, now it's the end of the year, everybody has finals. Kids have finals in elementary, high school, college, whatever. Everybody has tests. and they have a massive math test, history test, science test, chemistry, whatever. They have a massive test during the week. And they want to study on Shabbos for that test. Now, we said, reading the book on Shabbos, it's because it's a knowledge, a chokhmah, a book of wisdom. The halacha is you're allowed to read them on Shabbos, but you're still not allowed to study for the test. Why are you not allowed to study for the test? Because then you're preparing from Shabbos for after Shabbos. And rabbinically, it's forbidden to prepare anything on Shabbos for after Shabbos. So therefore, if somebody has a big test, halachically, they're not allowed to study. If they're having a dire situation, you need to call a shaila, ask a shaila, maybe whatever. Depends what mood it rubs in. If he had a good breakfast, whatever. But otherwise, no, really, the general answer is no, you're not allowed to prepare from Shabbos to the week. But halachically, what happens if somebody has a massive Gemara final, Chumash final, a Torah final? So then the din is, even though you're learning for the test, you are still allowed to learn it on Shabbos. Why? Because learning Torah is a mitzvah in itself. Learning Torah is a mitzvah within itself. It says you shouldn't say, let's study for the test. The similar din is, we learned already earlier, what happens if somebody wants to stay up very late Saturday night? They have to stay up late Saturday night. So they want to sleep Shabbos afternoon, especially in the long Shabbos, and you can sleep for a while. They want to sleep Shabbos afternoon to be able to stay up Saturday night. So the din is you're allowed to. Shulchan Aruch says, why are you allowed to sleep Shabbos afternoon if the primary purpose is to be up Saturday night? So the Gemara said, because sleeping on Shabbos is enjoyable, and in fact, Shabbos stands for Shina b'Shabbos Tainug. Sleeping on Shabbos is enjoyment. So therefore, you're allowed to do things that you're enjoying on Shabbos. But Shulchan Aruch says, you're not allowed to say, I'm sleeping in order to be up. So in other words, let's say you're having an event Saturday night and you want your kids to take a nap because they're going to be up late Saturday night. You're not allowed to say to the kids, go to sleep in order to be up by the function. You have to tell them, go to sleep. You can't say in order to be up by the function, because that's preparing already from Shabbos to the weekday, even verbally, and that is really something which is not allowed to be done. The same thing with newspapers, periodicals, like you said, stock, even let's say you're reading, I'm not saying if you're boycotting the LA Times, New York Times, all the Times is, but one thing is for sure, the business section, you're not allowed to read of any newspaper. Even if you're old, that you could read a newspaper on Shabbos, when many authorities say you're not allowed to read a newspaper on Shabbos. But even if you're reading it, you're not allowed to read business sections of any newspaper. Wall Street Journal poskim write that because the whole paper is business, Wall Street Journal, that's what it's called. So then you're not allowed to read those things in Shabbos. Even like you said, from magazines like Mishpacha, whatever, all those kosher Jewish press or whatever it is, you're not allowed to read the advertisements. Now, people ask a question, and this is brought down in a few poskim. They want to read a catalog, not because they're planning to buy anything. They just, like window shopping, people go window shopping. They're not planning to buy. They just looking because they enjoy looking. So now the question is, if they're looking at the Sears catalog, let's say, or whatever, because they enjoy reading it, not because they're planning to buy. In their mind, it's no business whatsoever. So then there are certain authorities that say you're allowed to, because again, you're not doing it for the business aspect of it. You're doing because you just enjoy it. Is one allowed to leave a few minutes before Mitzvah Shabbos to go somewhere for Havdalah? Yes, they can walk, they can go. That's not an issue. Okay, newspapers, magazines. Again, we said it's preferable. Newspapers that have Torah articles, you're allowed to read, but it says in halacha you have to be careful not to read the advertisements. Mail, by the way, the truth of the matter is people are lenient in it, but the truth of the matter is really mail is muktzeh. Because like this, if it's a bill, it's besides the fact it's business, it's painful. If it's a check, again, the check is muktzeh. If it's a notice you just won the lottery, okay, you're happy, but you're still, it's it's still business related. So personal correspondence, also some poskim write today, not that everybody brings this down also, that personal correspondence, even if it came before Shabbos, you shouldn't read on Shabbos. Because again, if it's great necessity, you need to know what's going on, so then you would be allowed to do it. Okay, same thing with the mail, and you're allowed to move mail and things like that. So again, all these things are questionable. Letters letters that have no function, not utensils. Many people say it's muktzeh. Therefore, some people maintain halachically that ideally you should not bring in the mail or touch the mail or move the mail. On Shabbos, you should just leave it where it ended off. Okay, so that is the aspect of food, basically. Anything which is not usable on Shabbos, so then you're not allowed to, it's muktzeh. Again, like we said, things caught that day, laid that day, prohibited foods, shatnez, meat and milk, things that you're not allowed to read on Shabbos, all those things are considered sometimes kedish malachta le'isad. That's as far as moving the paper, the book. But as far as reading it, that's a different story. Then you wouldn't be allowed to read most of these things in Shabbos. Okay, I don't want to start something else because let's go to Tanya now. And again, for those that joined later, the next 2 weeks, there's no class Wednesday night. No, next week, there's no class. 2 weeks, Wednesday night, there's no class. This Monday night, there will be a class, and the Monday night after that will not be a class.